Do you move your knight not 1, 2, 3, 4, but 5 times in the first 10 moves and playing as black? Well, if I do that, normally I lose my game straight away. Breaking so much a basic opening principle of not moving the same piece several times in the opening is normally way too much, but in today's game we're going to see an impressive opening idea played by Arjun Erigaisi. He is one of the many Indian prodigies that we have nowadays, and even the top players are already speaking very well about him.
Erigaisi. His chess is incredible.
And in this game he was playing against another Indian prodigy, Ramesh Babu Pragnananda, also known as Prag. This is one of the many games that these two players played in the quarterfinals of the FIDE World Cup played in Baku last August. So here Prag played c4, and after e6, knight to c3 and d5. Here Prag played move d4, we transpose into a queen's gambit, and here after the move c6 we have what we call a semi-Slav, where black has this very solid pawn structure. Taking on c4 might be an idea, and here white has many options. Knight to f3 is a very natural developing move, e3 is also very logical, e4 as well, and here Prag took on d5. This was a rapid game, so probably he wanted to avoid going for sharp lines and just played natural moves over the board, but this move has a slight drawback, even though it is still quite playable, because here after e takes d5, black has already solved one of his problems in the Slav, which is this bishop on c8. So now this bishop can develop freely, whereas with the pawn on e6, this bishop was locked in. So here Prag continued with the move bishop to f4, knight to f3 is another natural developing move, but the idea of developing the bishop to f4 is to have some flexibility with the knight, because this knight might sometimes develop to e2. For example, after bishop to f4, if black plays natural moves like knight to f6, then white has ideas to go e3, then go bishop to d3 and develop this knight to e2. This is more flexible for white. For example, just to show you one sample line, after bishop to d6, bishop takes and queen takes, bishop to d3, black castles. Now knight to f3 is perfectly playable, but knight g to e2 is also another interesting idea, very common in the queen's gambit, where white might have ideas to go f3 and later on e4, trying to dominate the center. But after bishop to f4, Erigaisi already played the first strange looking move and went knight to e7. So here knight to f6 or bishop to d6, trying to neutralize the bishop on f4, are definitely more natural moves. But here Erigaisi went for knight to e7, and this is already surprising. First of all, this is not a very common position, but this move had already been played a few times. But if we look at top engine moves in this position, this move is already suggested. So here this might not be a huge surprise. So knight to e7, this has the idea to go knight to g6, attacking the bishop on f4, but on the other hand it is blocking the bishop on f8, so black cannot develop the bishop on f8, and in this position the engine suggests a move like h4. And by the way, let me tell you an important idea in the opening. Whenever one side breaks a principle, it is very common to see the other side doing the same, or we can actually do the same. So here black is in a way wasting time by going knight to e7. That's why white can play a strange looking move like h4. And one of the ideas is after knight to g6 and bishop to g3, black already has to be a bit careful because the move h5 is already coming, trying to punish black for this strange opening play. But I'm not 100% sure about Prag's or Erigaisi preparation, but if I had to bet, I would say that Prag was not familiar with this line, or at least not very familiar, whereas Erigaisi had prepared this whole idea that we'll see later on in the game. By the way, let me know in the comments, what do you think about this, if the players had studied this position beforehand. So here Prag decided to go for e3, which is a very natural looking move, planning to develop the bishop on f1, and now we see the idea of knight to e7, knight to g6. The idea is to capture the bishop on f4, so even though black is wasting time, black will get the bishop pair. For example, if white allows this by going knight to f3, after knight takes and pawn takes, white gets better development, but black gets two very strong bishops. They are already active even on their initial squares. They already control a lot of squares, so black has to be careful because the king is on e8. Black has to safeguard the king, but in the long run, black might even try to fight for an advantage. That's why Prag went bishop to g3. So far maybe this is not very surprising, but now comes another knight move, knight to h4. Again here a move like bishop to d6 or bishop to f5. I would say that Erigaisi had already studied this position with an engine, because knight to h4 is a move that is approved by an engine, with the main idea to go knight to f5, again trying to capture this bishop on g3. So here Pragg played knight to f3, which is a very natural developing move. Maybe if I had this position and I was not prepared, maybe I would play the move h3 here. Since black is wasting time, I can also play a quiet move like h3, and after knight to f5, then go bishop to h2. Maybe this was an interesting alternative, not to allow black to capture the bishop on g3, which is what happened in the game. So here Pragg played knight to f3. Trading knights here would be very bad for black, because black is simply wasting time and helping white develop. So after knight takes, queen takes, black is simply developing and black has all of the pieces on the 8th rank. But Erigaisi's idea was to go knight to f5, attacking the bishop, and here Pragg played the move queen to b3. Here Pragg can try to keep the bishop and not allow black to get the bishop pair. One idea might be bishop to e5, but here black would develop and also try to capture the bishop on e5. And the other logical move is the move bishop to f4. And again, since I think that Pragg was not prepared in this position, maybe he was a bit afraid of bishop to e7 and then g5. This again breaks principles, but if you have an engine approving this idea, this is actually quite scary for white. But this idea actually is not very good for black. The other idea here for black is to go bishop to d6, again planning to trade and double white's pawns. And after bishop takes and knight takes, so we see all the maneuvering that white did with his knight on g8 just to get this knight on d6. And this knight on d6 in this pawn structure is actually very well placed, because here white normally gets this idea to get a minority pawn attack. White gets 3 pawns on the queen side against 4 pawns, so here going b4 and b5 is a very common idea, but the knight here is actually very well placed, controlling the b5 square and also eyeing the c4 square that gets weakened after the move b4. So this is just very deep positional preparation, because black made all these knight moves in this line just to get a good square for the knight. So going back to the game, after queen to b3, now again Erigaisi played a weird looking move. Instead of capturing the bishop on g3, which can be done later, here Erigaisi played the move a5, again a deep move, controlling the b4 square, which, as we saw in some lines, b4 might be an idea by white. This also might have an idea to develop the knight to a6, where the knight is defended by the rook, but also kind of waiting to see what white will do. So here after bishop to d3, now finally Erigaisi captured on g3, and after pawn takes. So we got 10 moves where Erigaisi only made pawn moves and moved one single knight. Playing as black, and amazingly black is still managing to get a very balanced position. So here Erigaisi continued with the move g6. There was an idea to capture knight 7, and now Pragg played a very interesting idea. Since white is more developed, white wants to open the position. So here Pragg played the move e4. Again, black has to be careful. So this opening idea also involved a pawn sacrifice. If black captures on e4, this is actually quite bad, because after knight to e5, there's a lot of pressure on f7. For example, after queen to e7, bishop to c4, f7 is just collapsing. Black cannot defend with a move like bishop to e6, because after bishop takes, the queen has to guard the b7 square, and after pawn takes, knight takes, white is already winning material, since there's a pin on the pawn h7, and the knight is attacking the rook and the queen. So after all these knight moves, there was the additional idea to sacrifice a pawn, bishop to g7, pawn takes, now black castles, but in return black gets 2 bishops, and after white castled, pawn takes and queen takes, knight to c6, we see how black now is developing very quickly, rook a to d1. The rest of the game is actually not very exciting. Black managed to equalize quite easily. Here bishop to e6 was probably a sharper option. Taking on d4 was also an alternative, but Erigaisi played very solidly when bishop to g4. Black will get the pawn back and will get a lot of trades. After bishop to e4, bishop takes, pawn takes, and knight takes. White traded queens, and after rook takes, the position is actually quite balanced. Here Prague went rook to d3. If white takes on b7, after rook to b8, the b2 pawn will fall, so white is not achieving anything here. And after rook to d3, knight to e6, we got more trades. Bishop takes b7. Here rook to b8 is also possible, but Erigaisi played actively knight to c5 first, and after bishop to c6, rook to d6, bishop to b5, rook to d2. There's no pressure on the pawn on b2 and also on the knight, so black is going to get the material back. And after rook to e1, rook takes. The game ended in a draw after a few moves. We got more trades. Here we have equal material and opposite colored bishops, so this position is very drawish. After bishop to c4, king to g7, f4, knight to d7, knight to d5, bishop to c5, king to g2, knight to b6. The players agreed to a draw. At this level, getting a draw as black is normally good, so this was just a very good game by Erigaisi. And the moral of the story is that if you're going to move your knight several times in the opening, prepare this in advance or have very concrete ideas behind your moves. Hope that you enjoyed this game. Please give it a like if you did. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.